All right, so we are back, guys. It's been well, I was about to say it's been a hot minute, but no, we had a session week before last. Um, got back rolling. I took off the majority, all actually all I took off all of the month of March to focus on an event that I do in Miami. And actually, the guy that I do this event with in Miami, I met him the same weekend that I met today's guest. So, it's a very momentous episode, I would say. Whereas this person, she holds a very big part in my heart and has for March of this year. So a month and a few weeks. Oh, hold up. That was 7 years, a month, and a couple of weeks I've known her. And we've never allowed ourselves to go too many months. We had a little stint where we went a good number of months without communicating. But when you're really connected with someone, when you can go months or a year plus without speaking, but then whenever you do speak again, it's like you never missed a beat. So, with that being said, we're here with Legacy Dialogues, where I bring you professionals from all across the world who have become someone in their space, that are doing great things in their space, that are leaving a legacy in the space that they have carved out for themselves. And I just want them to be able to expose to you what the probability is. Now, possibility, well, I guess what the possibility is, the probability is in your hands. So the possibility is these people have done great things, they are doing great things, are impacting lives around the world. That's a possibility. But the probability is, are you willing to do in your lane what they have done in their lane so that you, in your own respect, can create your legacy? And with that being said, without further ado, I bring to you Terra Dawn. What's good?
Hey.
Man, so last week, actually the last few weeks, I want to say it's been over a week since we kind of it's been probably about a month or so since
Mhm.
I was gonna have you on. And I had you in one of my journals and flipped some pages, had already taken more notes. Hold up, I'm supposed to be going live with the tarot one of these days, but when? So I had a list of all the people that I'm supposed to reach out to. And then you reached out to me yesterday. It was like, hey, we still on for tomorrow. I'm like, what? Tomorrow?
Which brings us back to how we met. I was the time management coach.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah.
Oh.
She's still on top of it, guys. So yeah, I guess we can kind of that'll be our second step. Kind of going into how we met. But
Mhm.
go into how we met. Just kind of share with the people, who are you? Who is Coach Terra Dawn? Where you from? Like, what are your areas of expertise? Who? Give us a snapshot.
Okay, snapshot. I am from Alberta, Canada. I live in the south of Alberta, right by the mountains. My favoriteest place to be. And I it's really challenging to sum it up within a label of what I do. So I call myself a life strategist because I actually essentially run two businesses. I do business coaching for coaches and trainers, and I actually collaborate with two business coaches out of Texas, Chris and Eric Martinez. And I do mindset mentoring and social media strategy and that sort of thing with them. But I also host a women's business collective where we dive into running a business like a woman, running a business like a woman, a little bit different than the hustle grind culture that we've always been taught. And I do it from a proven standpoint of this is how I run my business as well. So it's proven. I don't ever teach anything I haven't experienced or haven't figured out for myself. And then on the other side, I do a lot of trauma work, inner child reconnection, self abandonment, self sabotage, which includes time management, but there isn't much off the table when I do my work. And so to wrap it all up, it's really hard to put it, people are, oh, so you're a life coach. Well, kinda, but there's so much more to it. I see solutions that most people don't see, and I offer solutions. So it just became apparent that I just life strategist felt really good. So that's what I call myself. And that, but I do so many different things. I attempted to at one point niche down. That's what they will tell you when you come into the coaching industry. I felt like I was chopping off three limbs when I did that because everything intersects. Even like the healing work that I do intersects with the business work that I do. And so, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
Listening to this, and I'm like, I try to tell them. I try to tell them because it's the same with me. Like certain people know me for social work. He's a mental health, like emotional behavioral health person. Other people know me. Oh, he helps people start a business and get their business going. Oh, he helps people with their finances. Oh, like they all interweave in one way or another. So
Hmm.
one of my disciplines was, or my primary discipline methodology that I used was cognitive behavioral coaching. So I just let people know I help people, reprogram how they think across
Hmm.
spectrum of life. I just have
Hmm.
entrepreneurship. Typically, entrepreneurship, there's people who are dealing with mental and emotional issues. Once they start making a little money, they're dealing with financial issues. So, just help with the whole thing there. So yeah, I never really thought about it that way when it comes to you and what you do, but that's so real. And lots of people do feel like I have to niche down, but just like you said, you feel like you're cutting off a limb because for one,
Hmm.
you know that you can give value in all of these areas, but at the same time, they coincide with one another. So it's like if
Hmm.
stop doing this, I'm pretty much giving business to someone else that I could be doing because I'm saying that no, I'm no longer that. So, uh,
Well, and really, when people tell you to niche down, they're trying to make you small. They're trying to put you in a box. And some of us don't fit in a box, so we bust out of the box. It's kind of just what we do. And at the bottom line of it, I'm actually working on a new course right now, and it's about playing bigger. That's very much my messaging. And we play small. It comes from childhood stuff. And so when we look at, I was listening to you talk about, the different mindsets, and, as people start growing, what went through my head is new levels bring new devils. And so, but that's all stuff that's been trained into us at an early age, from our money paradigms to the self-doubt to the quote unquote imposter syndrome, which I don't love that term. But it's one of those things that it really comes down to when people try to niche us down, they're asking us to play small based on their limitation. They're not allowing us to flourish and thrive. And so I see it in you because you are like the jack of all trades, and I'm like a female version of you.
and it's maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago, that apparently that phrase is longer than what we're accustomed to hearing. It's most people hear you're a jack of all trades, a master of none. But when we're actually, it's a jack of all trades and a master of none is always better than a master of one. Something along.
Yeah.
And it's real, and especially if you think about today's day, think about all the people who only had one specialty, one expertise in technology, artificial intelligence, whatever, wiped them
Mhm.
out. Now what? So
Mhm.
it definitely helps to be multifaceted. So March 23rd weekend of 2018. I remember back to that early winter. So October, if I'm not mistaken, October the 10th is or 9th or 17th. I don't know. Sometimes in October, there's a lot of October days in my life, but I remember it was October of 2017 that I actually partnered up with The Rich Way. And I remember you and a few other Canadians being on that first Zoom that I was on. That was actually my first time on Zoom, too, I believe. Um, and then, we started to build a connection because we were coaching alongside one another, pouring
Wow.
into other individuals, but also pouring into one another.
Mhm.
And Uh, so I remember, I'm seeing you through a screen all, these months, and we get to the hotel, and you get out the vehicle, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize you were that little. I
Yeah.
how short you were, and it's something I always look back at and laugh, like the beginning of our actual knowing each other
Mhm.
connection. So, kind of share with the people, and I'll give my perspective as well, but share with the people how you got involved in that specific program, like what led you to the Rich
Mhm.
Way, and
Mhm.
things that, based off of where you are now, you kind of attribute to that stage or that area, that time frame of your life.
Well, actually, it was a friend of mine that I had actually met through personal development. I had met her in another room when I was coaching in a seminar. She was one of the participants, and we had connected very superficially at the time. And then when she became part of the Rich Way, um, she had looked at it as an opportunity for me. At the time, I was in the fitness industry. I was personal training, and I was running an MLM at the time, running with an MLM. And but I had a bigger skill set, and my business at the time, I knew that there was something more than just exercise and diet. And so I was always going at it from a different angle than every other trainer on the planet. And so she led me to the Rich Way. And it wasn't long that I was in there that I realized that not everybody manages time well or at all. And so that became my area of expertise. And at the time, was actually managing 5 jobs plus doing the work with the Rich Way. So I essentially had 6 jobs at the time as a single parent and coming through some of the darkest parts of my life. And I got into it because I wanted to be a part of self-development on a regular basis, get connected, like-minded people, have community, and a space where my personal life was a disaster. And so that's what led me there. What kept me there was realizing I could create an impact with helping people learn boundaries, which I'm still doing that now, just with a different label. Helping people learn boundaries, helping people learn self respect, self worth, and manage their time just a little bit better. Because that is, and even to this day, with the business coaching side of my work, I still hear the time management is my biggest struggle. Well, no, actually, what it is, it's boundaries and a lack of self respect. And so, that's what led me to the Rich Way. And I actually, prior to jumping on here, said to Brian, I was thinking about it this morning and I was like, I don't know that I would be where I am without that start with the Rich Way. And I will give credit where credit is due. And things come to us in phases. People are the same thing. The person that led me here or led me to the Rich Way, we don't connect anymore for various reasons. Um, and none of which at the end of the day matter, but I'm still here. And it brought me to meet Brian, and it brought me to meet some of the other people that he has interviewed in the past, whether he brought them to me or I brought them to him or whatever the case may be. And so at the end of the day, it's the connections as well as helping me realize that this was my area to be in.
Yeah, it's like I'm just playing back history in my mind as you're speaking, and it's just so beautiful. But also, I'm playing back the vulnerability that you had from the jump. Like you were one of those individuals that had a past that most people would be ashamed of, and most people would, hide away from sharing. But the fact that you came straight out and you shared like the trauma that you've been through, the relationships that you've been through, and I feel like that was one of the things that allowed people to gravitate towards you, because whenever we are open and vulnerable, it indirectly allows other people to feel safe to do the same. So I know I've shared things with you that I haven't shared with many other people, because I know you are that open book that I can pour into, and vice versa. So would you say, and I know, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but what would you say? about your past leading up to the rich way had heavy impact on what you did transitioning into the coaching space more deeply and getting you to where you are today? Like, how much of your past and anything in specific you want to share about your past, like, got you, over these last few years to doing the work you're doing?
All of it. From being, like I was raised as a farm kid, Gen Xer. My parents both worked two jobs. I had a younger brother, so heavy responsibility at an early age. Moved to college when I was 17. No self-respect, and all the things that goes with going to college with no self-respect, and hard relationships that I chose out of woundedness. And I think this could be a whole nother stream. But we attract what is meant to expose our wounds. And I know there's a lot of people that are gonna be like, I don't agree with that. That's okay. You don't have to. But the reality is I was attracting out of what my wounds were attracting. So I attracted unhealthy people. And even in my work, like I was super passionate about my work, but I lead a 12-week program right now, and we just talked about overworking as a survival strategy when you're in survival mode. And I was overworking. I was, doing all the things and six jobs, like really. And so, you know, there isn't a segment of my life that I would say didn't contribute to where I am now. I'm on the other side of so much of where my clients start. And like I said, or maybe I said this on my last call, I don't teach what I haven't experienced. I don't coach on what I haven't experienced. So you've had a rough start. Okay. And I worked in human services for a number of years. I worked with at-risk families. So this is my education too. This isn't just simply, people will often ask, what are your qualifications? Like, you've got all these letters behind your name. Mine is a college education, working with at-risk families for 8 years, but it's a lot of like school of hard knocks, so to speak, that has led me exactly to where I am. And you will never catch me talking about something that haven't experienced or don't know anything about. And so now my work is very much about being the woman I needed, like half a lifetime ago. I won't say how many years that was. Half a lifetime ago, I needed this version of me. And that version of me would be standing there clapping and saying, I want to be like her. And that's at the end of the day, what I help a lot of people step into is realizing their potential and realizing that they can be a better version of themselves if they so wish. I'm not telling anybody they have to be, but there isn't an ounce of my past that has every ounce of my past has contributed to this moment, basically.
Yeah, and honestly, we, especially we as coaches, would say that everyone's every ounce of your past contributed, but it's the self awareness of it and understanding
Mhm.
realize it that sets us apart. Whereas I look back to when I was little video thing, getting in fights at the Head Start, like 4 years old, and learning to stand up for myself. My mama telling me to go back to school. You better not let that boy beat you up again, and me actually beating the boy up. So
Mhm.
developing resilience at such a young age, and how can I apply that to something, maybe not a physical altercation now, but how can you apply that to something that you're doing now for yourself but also for those who you serve? Oftentimes you see, and I throw air quotes around we, because I don't put us in that category, but oftentimes you see individuals live a certain past, and their thought process, is the cognitive distortions. They go to the automatic, just this is the way this is going to be because that's the way this was. And they don't take the into account, like, hold up, I actually control what happens up here. I actually control this internal dialogue, not what happened back then, not what those people are saying. And the sad thing is just a lot of people just don't have the wherewithal based off of the environment. Whereas you, no, go ahead.
Well, and what I'm going to say to that is, A, I was not ever a fighter. I was a lover. always a lover. And I was a very lighthearted, spirited child, like the singy, dancy child. And that's where some of my work is reconnecting to the inner child. And if anybody's on my Instagram stories or my TikTok, you're going to see me dancing again for the first time in years. Um, and, uh, and it's just to have fun. I don't care what anybody thinks. It's not about choreography. In fact, I can't be bothered, but it's returning to the who we were before the world got a hold of us and told us who we were supposed to be. And we have a choice, you know, and one of the analogies that I'll make is that we can have people that are raised in an abusive home. One follows that path, and the other one does the exact opposite. We do have a choice. And it's interesting, I get a lot of hate when I start talking about this, especially on TikTok particularly. And people really want to sit in that victim. I didn't have a choice. I didn't do the Well, you didn't have a choice then, but you do have a choice now. And I think that's the difference. It's like I work with single moms fairly regularly in the especially well in all of my work, but I see it more in the business side of my work where they're like, "Yeah, but you don't." No, I do get it. And when somebody comes at me and says, "You don't get it," I'm like, "Oh, but I do, because I've been there." And we have a choice on how we move forward in our growth and healing and how we navigate. It's that resilience. Um, one sibling can choose to be the drinker and the other one not when they're raised in an alcoholic home. Like if we want to talk about social issues in particular, we also have people that raised in a wealthy household, and one chooses to be a bum and the other chooses to optimize on the wealth. Like, we have a choice, and we just have to choose not to be a victim of the circumstance.
Yeah, and that's the thing, circumstances, your a result. What is you're a product of your environment. So yes, and yes, you're a product of that environment. So you can continue being that same product, or you're not product of that environment. So you can choose. You know what? I don't like being the product that I have been. Let's go in this direction. And I kind of think, when it comes to human development, those first 7 to 8 years being the formative stage, and we're learning vicariously. We don't have a choice of, where
Mhm.
position. We can't make these decisions. We're told you're going to be at this school in this classroom around these kids being taught by these individuals, with us as your parents. And then we get to, so we're kind of like on this plateau if I don't have a choice. And then we get to the teenage years where we have a little bit more liberation. So we can make some of those decisions for ourselves. Now, there's those that say, you know what? When I become an adult, I'm going to continue to go in that trajectory. Or when I become an adult, I'm going to stay where I grew up, and I'm going to fall right back into those same habits that were programmed into me at a younger age. And it comes with um, intentional or intentionally and repetitively putting yourself in a different place, at a different
Mhm.
and most people are so that's my A1 from day one. Okay, if that's your A1, keep on. You're gonna be looking, living, and feeling the same way you were back in day one, and it's
Mhm.
have to be okay with um, finding, learning, becoming friends with brand new people. I
Mhm.
there's almost nobody that I talk to on a regular basis today that I talk to, throughout my childhood. Like most of my friends, I may speak to them once or twice a year, their birthday, my birthday. And there's no love loss, but I decided that I am going to continue to go in that trajectory. And obviously, you were able to, and you are able to continue going in that direction. That's why you can so effectively help others do the same thing.
Yeah, well, and I can say that other than the odd message maybe once a year from the odd person, I'm not in touch with anybody that I went to high school with. I have one friend from grade 2. Her and I stay connected. And it's very intermittent, and I'm really, really grateful for her because it's been an in and out stages of life. Um, but, I actually saw something the other day that talked about when you are doing growth work, you are changing so much that there is like a 7-year cycle on your friendships. I think this is one of the hardest part of this work is that when we step into this healing work, we start to grieve people, and people start to act in really undesirable ways because they liked us the way we were before we started growing. And so we've had to grieve a lot of people, which also develops that resilience. But it's a 7-year cycle on friendships. And that's evidence that you're growing and changing. That's actually a good thing. And so as I put that number together, and we've known each other for 7 years, I'm like, well, you aren't going out of the cycle in any way, shape, or form. But it's, a true representation that you're supposed to grow, you're supposed to change. And when people don't do the work, they will be left where they were. I don't want to use the term left behind because it's not a competition. It's not behind what or who, but they will be where they are, and that's okay for them. But that's not enough for us. And I'm going to say, go out on a limb and say, you probably felt the same way I did, that you knew that you were meant for more than what you were growing up with.
Yeah.
And
And my dad poured into me at a young age that he saw more in me than I was surrounded by. And I didn't really think much of it before then. I knew I was a lot more talented athletic wise, um, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to the fact that I was a lot smarter than a lot of my peers. And I had that hunger for more, and I didn't settle, but I never paid attention to it until he pointed it out. But once he pointed it out, I kept it in the back of my mind, and it's like just that was a new piece of programming for me. So everything that I pursued, like I'm supposed to so by default, it was easy to excel. And it's the same thing now in life. And I had a conversation. I was on a meeting before our session, and one of the ladies was mentioning how even whenever she's going through some of the darkest of times, she doesn't stress it because she knows the greatness that she has within, and that I'm going to be on the other side of this before I even realize it. And
mhm,
like that's one of the things, the layers of resilience that separates the haves from the have-nots in certain areas in life, not necessarily always financially, but the have joy versus the not having joy, is because we don't get stuck in the current situation. I remember when I was in Miami and I lost my job after only a month. Prematurely got into it because I saw big money, but it wasn't for and I had a buddy that, after him realizing my situation, he told me, he was like, Brad, I don't see how you do it. I would have put a gun in my mouth by now. And I'm like, no, it ain't that serious. But
mhm.
some people, they are so, I don't want to say weak, but for lack of better words, they haven't built up the mental and emotional fortitude to go through some of the things that we see as just water off the back. Like, I'm gonna get through this. Um, and I've just continued to take that with me throughout life. And being a parent, and we can kind of segue into that. Being a parent, the way that I raise my kids by setting or being the example, like I've seen it benefit them. Whereas there's other people in their lives, and I'm not going to call any names, that have a completely different approach to life. And you can see how it affects them when they're, not around me. So ultimately, you know, we are we are planting little seeds from the trees that we grew up as into the trees that our kids are growing up as. So and I know it's different from family to family, but as a mother, how would you say your outlook on life, as you have navigated throughout adulthood and gotten into the line of work that you're in, how would you say that line of work, how all of that has impacted you as a mother?
Okay. Well, I'm going to back up for a minute first and just talk a little bit. Like you talked about having your dad pouring into you. My parents were so busy working just to make things work that I didn't have that. And in fact, I had an 11 grade 11 teacher that told me I was never going to make it anywhere or do anything with my life. So I had the opposite of what was going on for you, that, I should just settle. That's what I was taught. And, I didn't, I've often been asked why I took the hard road. I didn't see another road. And so until I did. And then I'm like, no, that road's not for me anymore. And that came with a lot of healing work that I started 16 years ago. And so how that impacted my parenting, I was parenting somewhat like I was parented in the early years before I started doing my own healing work. Doing the best to not show up as their inner critic by being the outer critic and criticizing the kids. I have two adult children and then one that is 10. And so my oldest, I I wish I could have done it differently. And I can't undo. I gave up all hope of a better past, is what I tell my clients regularly. And he's now an adult and he now gets to decide how he wants to navigate his life. My middle one, also, same thing. They get to decide how they're navigating this life. And I give them space to decide what they want. And that's the difference, is that I didn't say you have to go to college. I felt like there was pressure to go to college. Um, and I'm not denouncing education by any means. My oldest went into the military and wasn't in very long before he sustained a PTSI. And then he came out and he's had a really rough road. Um, in that rough road has become some beautiful things, as I now have two bonus daughters and two granddaughters. And so every hard stuff, all the hard stuff can bring blessings as well. At the bottom, at the end of the day, it's I wanted them to become who they wanted to become. It wasn't about me. I wanted them to spread their wings. My son moved 4 provinces, 5 provinces away. My middle child moved 2 provinces away. And, struck out on their own. I wanted them to do that. And even my 10-year-old, I'm raising him very differently. He gets to be a kid. I didn't give that gift to my other two because I didn't know any better. And so when people are tempted to have children late in life, you're a very different parent for each child. And so it's, as I'm in my late 40s and parenting, it's a very different demographic. And my youngest gets to decide how he's doing this life, but in like safety, within safety, right? We've dug into human design, which has been really fascinating. And it's about our genetic, our makeup from the beginning. And I get to parent him according to that, or use that as a tool for parenting, which is really cool. So all the things that I have been through has allowed me to develop an awareness in my kids that things are not sunshine and roses for a lot of people. And I wanted to give them a deep sense of empathy in how they were being brought up. And they had lots of, my son was in cadets, my daughter was an elite dancer for 11 years. My youngest, they have privileges. They're very privileged kids. But I don't allow them to come too far away to forget that there's people that aren't living like this, and to have empathy and to have compassion. So it has really um impacted my parenting in the way that I'm hoping to raise kind human beings that are going to have um, a heart led life that allows them to thrive in whatever they decide to do.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And just to kind of go back to where you went back to, as far as like my father pouring into me. Um, no, don't get it twisted. Dad was gone all the time too. One statement he made to me that really it triggered, but he was there sports wise, like he and I, we have a really great relationship now, but we didn't have a close relationship whenever I was a kid. um, he was gone so much working that he made sure that when he was present, we were making sure our grades were right and that we were good athletes, me specifically. And I got pushed. um I was called sorry. I was called you ain't no son of mine. That's like I got pushed, but it always like it pushed me not to a breaking point, but it pushed me in building a muscle. and it made me continue to get stronger and stronger. And you know, he and my parents weren't exposed to a lot of what the world has to offer, so he would always just point me to in the direction that he felt is far enough away from what he had to go through to where I can experience something different, something better. So I always looked at the relationship between him and my mom, and then the relationship between him and us as like, okay, I'm paying attention to this because one day I'm going to be one of these or not be one of these. And I looked at how things were between he and my mom, and they weren't good. They ended up getting divorced 2010, if I'm not mistaken. I was in college by then, but I looked at their relationship as an example of the opposite of what I want to be. I, have my significant other, but then I looked at how he worked his tail off to provide for us, and I said, I'm gonna be a hard worker, just like my dad was. And I feel that I've done so. But and then this is kind of I know our circumstances were different, but I ended up going through a divorce, and a lot of that came with my hard workedness. Like I was always going and going and going because I never wanted my children to have the childhood that I had. I wanted to make sure that I take it up a notch. Every generation, I'm a firm believer, like you should make it a little bit better. Don't, take all the responsibilities away, but make it a little bit better than yours was. And that kind of drove a wedge between me and their mom. But it's all about the choices that you make,
Mhm.
that which you really desire and you really envision being a benefactor for the future of your life, or you can just settle for what has been and just kind of go with the flow and let life beat you up as you go with it. And that's why I'm glad to have people like you in my circle that you don't allow your past to define a direction that you're going in. And I remember
Mhm.
there, like your past relationship, like what? That many times? And you up like feeling good? Like it's a beautiful thing. So in tune with the title, and I just kind of pull it out of the air for this session. As a woman in the entrepreneurship space, I know you primarily work with women.
Mhm.
What would you say, just in working alongside, we can kind of go back to our time in the rich way, and maybe, slightly after that when you were still, potentially working alongside certain men. What would you say is a one of the biggest differences that you've seen, specifically in the entrepreneurship space? And what is one of, I'm going to say, the biggest advantages of being a woman in entrepreneurship?
Mm. I've never been asked that question before. Um, hmm. They come in with an inherent softness more often than not. This actually that particular statement actually came from a realtor that I was talking to. Because I do social media strategy, I have these conversations often. And I was going to an open house, and um, I said to him, I said, well, if you ever want some help with your social media game, I'd be happy to help you out. And he's like, well, women are just better at that. I'm like, that is a load of garbage. If you want to convince yourself of that story, by all means. But I think, he made reference to the realtor I was working with, and she has a beautiful aesthetic to her social media. And let's be real. Social media is a very prominent part of advertising. People don't read newspapers anymore. They don't listen to the radio anymore. Like, we don't, that's not, so you have to be in the online space. And I would say that women come across generally inherently softer. Not always, but I think that can be an advantage, especially when people have been mishandled or treated very harshly. And I often get accused of being quite bold, quite blunt, quite direct. I've also been told I'm rude. Um, I don't sugarcoat things. And that looks or sounds or feels aggressive to somebody who's used to having everything sugar coated for them and enabled. And I don't enable my son's a recovering addict. Enabling is not what I do. I've been through the AA rooms, the NA rooms, Al-Anon rooms, and so I don't sugarcoat things, and that's what my clients love about me, and that's what they don't love about me. And I'd say in the female, being a female entrepreneur, I think one of the best gifts is our softness, and we need to return to that. And that's where my coaching women in business comes in, is that many of us are living in our half heavy masculine, and because that's what we were raised in, and that's survival mode for women. And so I want to help women heal into their feminine in a really beautiful way and run business in their feminine. Feminine doesn't mean wishy-washy and do what you want when you want. It does mean that you have a surrender, you have a groundedness, you have a sense of grace, you have the ability to be magnetic. A healthy feminine is extremely magnetic. And so we have that power. It's a superpower. And most women don't use it because they're worried about, well, somebody's going to think that they're being too flirty, or, the way I've actually had this accused to me that I was dressing too sexy to look professional. And I'm like, thanks for caring enough to share. You're not my ideal client anyway. Do not care what you have to say. So it's like we have a sensuality, a magnetism about us, a softness about us. I think that can be really, really attractive. But it really boils down to attracting our ideal client. So yeah, that's our advantage, is that we have that natural magnetism, but men have that too. You have it, right? Any of the men that are in my space in this work, you've interviewed Chris Perkins, for example. You interviewed him, and him and I've been friends for over 20 years. And so he has a magnetism about him, and it's undeniable. And I think that's where we have to, rather than woman versus man. We all have our superpowers. We all have our strengths. Our strengths come with our healing. Our strengths come with understanding exactly who we are. That self assuredness, that reassuredness, that confidence, that self worth and self respect. So, to answer your question, the magnetism and that softness is really an advantage. But beyond that, anybody can have that if you do the right work.
That's it right there, doing the right work, because some people can aim to go in that direction, but go overboard, become a pushover, become too soft. And that's why I feel, just listening to you right now, you are a great person to be able to exemplify in a coaching capacity that balance, because you have the wherewithal to be a hard ass and tell people this is how it's going to be. I don't care how you feel about it, but at the same time, be there for them, the shoulder to cry on if they need it. And it's one of the things that I highly admire about you. And it's one of the things that I love in women in general. It's one of the things that, not in a sexual capacity, but that attracts me to certain women, is when they're strong and they're firm, they know what they're doing, and they have a high level of self-confidence, but they know when to just be girly and to be a woman,
Mhm.
and not allow themselves to be pushed over just because they're being soft. Is one of the things that, you know I coach a lot of the women who are in business myself. I'm like, look, you're a woman. Like, sex sells, not sex in and of itself, but beauty, your self-confidence and how you carry yourself. People are going to want to do business with you because of that, simply because of what they see, how they feel, by being around you. But it's up to you to know where to put that boundary. It's up to you,
Mhm.
allow them to cross over to where their mind may be considering. You bring them in, but then you stop them. And actually, what's his name? Tyrese Gibson. No, it was, yeah, Tyrese Gibson. He was interviewed by Steve Harvey. It was probably about 15 years or so ago. And Steve Harvey asked him, he said, so Tyrese, man, like, how you keep your head on straight out here? You got you the sexy chocolate, and all the women are throwing themselves at you. And Tyrese said, you let the sexy bring them to you. But when you get them there, that's when you put them on the reel. And that's how you have to operate. Allow, don't shut off your beauty, the things that make you feel good about yourself. Don't shut it down, but let them realize, yes, this is who I am, but it doesn't give you an open door to come and treat me however you want to treat me.
Mm-mm.
things that I admire about you, one of the things that I admire about so many of the women that are currently in my life. Because the ones that are too far on one side or too far on the other, like I'm not trying to deal with that energy. I don't want someone that only complains and cries and wants to be soft 24/7 and never takes accountability. And then I don't want the one always super aggressive and never, has any type of emotional connection. So I respect that, and seeing that you are working with so many women and just seeing your consistency over the years, like I love it, and I know you're effective with your work, and that's why anytime I know of someone, a woman that is in your area, that could benefit from your help, like I'm definitely sending them your way. And when I connected you with Carla. So I could have been a hog and said, no, I'm keeping her all to myself. If my client help her, I'm going to do. But before I even took her on to help her with anything, I said, look, connect with Tara. Like you have got to meet her, got to get in her organization, her community, and just to see that you guys were able to connect and get
Mhm.
that capacity. Like I pat myself on the back for saying, I'm glad I made that connection because just like the last call that I was on before we started, we were speaking about how the things that we love to do, the gifts and our purpose and such, it's not necessarily for us to keep to ourselves and feel good about ourselves. It's for us to utilize that to help others, to give to others. So me seeing what I saw in you or what I see in you allowed me to say, here, you need this person because you can help them so efficiently. And that's why I keep you in my life. And I don't.
I'm so grateful for you. Yeah, when Carla reached out to me, well, you had reached out to me to give me the heads up, and then when Carla and I connected, she's been so amazing to work with. And it's you were talking about why would, we have a purpose, and when we keep it to ourselves, we're actually being incredibly selfish. We're put on this earth for a plan, for a reason. We're not here to just simply exist. And when we make ourselves small, and when we don't allow ourselves to step into vulnerability, we are actually robbing the world of the awesomeness that we could be providing for other people. And that doesn't mean that we're here to just give, 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 give. It comes in balance. As a natural healing personality, there is the danger of overgiving. Like you talked about the overworking and working extra hours because you're a natural giver, you're a natural healer to some extent. And so it's, we have to really, take a look at that. And anybody that's watching this that, has been tempted to start a business or tempted to step into something that is really, really scary, think about the impact that you're going to create. And it's not always about other people, but that's usually the motivator to get people going. It's like, my reason for starting coaching and to stay coaching was because I kept a promise to my youngest. I promised that when I found out I was pregnant with him, that I was going to stay at home with him. And I had a promise to keep. I wasn't willing to give up that promise. I could have gone back to work in a regular job. I could have gone back to human services. And the impact was so much better and so much greater with what I was doing. There was no way I was going to give that up. It would have been selfish of me to give that up. And now, like you say in my area, but I work internationally as well. I have a client over in Switzerland right now, and I've had people from all over, and actually 70% of my client base is actually from the States, with the business coaching side especially. But it's, we have an opportunity to do something bigger than us, and we were meant for more, and we have the opportunity to make an impact, even if it's only in 100 lives in our lifetime. I think that's a pretty big freaking deal. So why wouldn't we? And I'm just really grateful that our paths have crossed the way they have because here we are 7 years later and still doing this. Look at us go.
And it's crazy. Sometimes, sometimes I look at on social media some of the people that were with us back then, how like they're just complete different space. They completely abandoned what they were focused on back then, and it just goes to show lots of people. And I'm not saying this is the truth for all of them, But so many people are like have the squirrel syndrome, like you're just chasing one thing after the other,
Mhm.
and that come my way all the time, and they're trying to present me with something, and I'm like, no, like if it's not here, I don't want to hear it. And I
Mhm.
had this conversation earlier. There's a gentleman out of I think he's out of Florida, and he's been trying to get me on the phone to talk about his business opportunity, and he got super aggressive last yesterday, uh, throwing these big numbers at me and name dropping, and I'm like, dude, you wasting your time. I'm not that guy. Like, I
Mhm.
don't millions of dollars you're making a year. Like, if you're making those millions of dollars doing something that's going to make me miserable, I don't want to do it.
Mhm.
So it's just so important to make sure that you stay connected with the right type of people. You have the right morals and values and ethics. I'm not even gonna say the right. You know what your morals and values and ethics are, and you stay in alignment with
Mhm.
who share those with you. So, with that being said, and we're gonna do a part two because I want us to go deep. I want us to get emotional about some stuff. So we're gonna do a days. But um, you have recently started a YouTube account.
Mhm.
I'm going to drop into the chat. I'm going to put in our description as well once I post or update the video. What is your YouTube name so I can plug it in?
Coach Terra Dawn on all my platforms. Keeping it simple, making it easy. Yeah, and my YouTube, I just got it started. And so I'm taking a little hiatus off of recording right now because I'm moving next week. So until that is all set up and done, I've got boxes around me right now. So until I've got everything all settled, I'm going to take a little hiatus. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm going to be on YouTube more. I'm actually starting a podcast. And so
Nice.
the YouTube was a preliminary outlet to allow myself to step into that space and get comfortable as I gear up for this podcast.
Of it. Well, yeah, and we had a little brief back and forth about that because I'm like, you
Yeah.
gotta.
I want you on my podcast. You're on a list. I have a whole list of people that I want on my podcast. And I think you're like number one or two.
Man, I love talking, and
Mhm.
I love talking because I hear my voice. Like ever since I was little, I hated my voice, but I got to a point where I mean, I'm a talker, and I love giving the value away that I've obtained. And I feel like if I can give value, I can help other people change their lives by me opening my mouth, then it's a disservice for me to stay quiet. So,
Me too.
yeah, and that's why we love each other.
Absolutely.
Well, we are definitely going to, the two of us, continue this conversation after hours because we have some more things to talk about. But any final things you want to leave with the audience? Any things that are coming up you want us to add to the description? Any products or services you want to plug?
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Well, I've published 4 journals. So it's a big part of my practice. And I think that's, one of the things that if you I think this is what I could leave it with is that anybody that wants to get into self development and they're scared to hire a coach, I get it. If they've done therapy or counseling and they don't want to go into that space, journaling is probably the biggest proponent to growth on a self development level without another human being helping you. And so I actually have 4 journals published. I have a men's journal, a kids journal. My son and I developed that as a homeschooling project. And then I have 2 women's journals. One's a 90-day journal, one is a second edition that is actually like my men's journal, but just for women. And so you can find them on Amazon. If you go on Amazon and if you search Terra Dawn, all 4 of them will pop up. And so if you want to start doing some growth work and you want a starting point, it's a really great way to do that. There's deep dive questions in there, there's assessments in there, and it gives you an opportunity to dig in a little bit. Growth is hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And if everybody would do it, we wouldn't have a dumpster fire of a dating scene. I'm so glad I'm not in that scene anymore. But it's one of those things that growth is hard. And that's why people don't want to do it. But it's probably the best thing that you'll ever invest in for yourself. Even my students are not going to love me for saying this, even before a coach or like a fitness coach or trainer. Um, it starts with the growth. It starts with what's here and here that's going in here. And that's what made me get out of personal training and fitness industry and into coaching full time.
I love it.
Hmm.
Well, I am going to aim to plug in all of your resources, your links, all that stuff in the YouTube description. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I appreciate your time. Definitely, probably sometime this summer, we'll do part two. Um, we'll do part two, but it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to put you backstage, close out with the audience, and then I'll come back to you and bid adieu.
Thanks so much, Brian, for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here. Oh, I always have a great time with Tara. Tara is, you saw it, that's her all the time. And you want to surround yourself with people that are in alignment with the direction you're going in. It's so often that we find ourselves getting stuck with the individuals that we feel comfortable with. And oftentimes we only feel comfortable around them because they don't force us to grow. They don't force us to do the things that are difficult to become a better version of ourselves. They accept who we were, even if who we were is a toxic version. That's who they prefer because that's comfortable for them. So, with that being said, we're out. That's a wrap for today. I'll be back tomorrow. You'll see some promotion on my social media here shortly. I'll be back tomorrow with a travel agent and school teacher. But I'll save it until I actually post it. Won't give her name. But off that note, guys, much love. Y'all go out, be great, and we'll see you soon. Take care.